Welcome in to the Hot Read Podcast live here on Friday, May the 30th. I am your host, JT Ruhnke, writer and reporter here at the 440 Sports Podcast Network. You can follow me on Twitter at JT_Ruhnke. Finally back here on a Hot Read Happy Hour Friday. Finally through vacation, myself and my co-host Stoney Keeley here, editor-in-chief of the Sobros Network, one half of Football and Other F Words, and co-writer over at Stacking the Inbox. Stoney, how are you, my friend? Hope you are feeling well rested after a Memorial Day weekend / week vacation, although I saw that you were still grinding film on the Titans class, on the 2026 class in New Jersey on vacation. Like, could not take a break, but it is good to be back here live with all of you guys today. And of course, you as well. How are you doing, my friend?
Well, it's been a strange day, first and foremost,
Yes.
because I ran into an intersection this morning and rescued a kitten, and now I've been back and forth to the vet, and now we're trying to make sure this cat eats and make sure she's okay. It's like a jarring. You wake up and there's nothing on your plate for Friday, and you're just like, I'm gonna go out and get some coffee this morning, just taking it easy. The windows are down, you're listening to music, vibing, and then there's a kitten fighting for its life in the middle of an intersection. And I couldn't, like, the people wouldn't slow down to stop and help, so like I just ran out in the road, and a guy passed me, and I yelled at him to shut the fuck up, my F-bomb for the show, and he slowed down, and I thought, I was so mad I almost swung at a moving vehicle. I'm like, what if that would have been the way that I went out, was that I just punched a truck as it was driving by me, and then the guy just ran me over. I don't know. It's been kind of a jarring day after what was a relaxing week. And yeah, you know what? If you don't have a deadline, it's not work. So I have I don't know if I told you this, JT, or if I told Zach. I have the next 5 Film Fridays done. I just need to write the articles. So I used my time off to get ahead so that I could take time off, whatever kind of backwards sense that makes. That's what I've been working on. I got a few more poems written too. It was nice, man. It's not work when you want to do it. So I'm feeling pretty good.
That's incredible. Especially, I mean, going into an intersection, I believe you said it was by the Hendersonville Home Depot. I believe you said this morning. Hermitage
Home Depot.
Home Depot. Yeah. Wow. I mean, is the cat doing okay though? It is. Is it good?
All things considered, yeah. They couldn't get her in for an exam today, but they were like, bring her by the vet, bring her by the clinic, and we will triage her to make sure that she's going to be okay. If you really want to piss people off today, she has a really swollen lip that the vet said was pretty consistent from road rash that the kittens get when people just throw them out the window to dump them when they're driving by. And I'm at the vet thinking, I want to fight somebody right now. I'm going to swing on a moving vehicle if I don't settle down right now. But she's doing good, all things considered. We're going to go get her checked out tomorrow morning. Haven't gotten her to eat yet, so I'm a little worried about that, but she's sleeping. Lord knows what her life has been like since she's been out in the elements, so she's getting some much needed rest. And I did catch her making biscuits on the little towel that we have in the carrier for her, so at least she's alert, she's looking around, and she's not hissing at us when we try to pet her, so it's good.
Oh, well, that's great to hear, and it sounds like the people in the chat here are with you, saying that Daniel saying that you are a real American hero.
Oh, I don't have to go that far. I mean,
Jason saying, "Good for you, Stoney. Shittier people would have done less." But yeah, I mean, hey, what a wild way to start off your Friday. And hey, you know, the cat distribution system works in mysterious ways sometimes.
It does,
and
man.
so there it is. Local Eddie says local great man Stoney.
Thank you.
Daniel asked, what did you guys give it a name yet?
So
Daniel recommends Stonita, but
it just reminds me, one of my friends texted me and was like, you should name her Stoney. And I was like, yeah, okay. We were gonna try and find her a home. And as I'm driving home from the vet, I'm telling my wife, giving her an update, like, okay, well, I'll take her back to get an exam in the morning, but for now she's good. We're just going to take her back, let her get some rest, keep her warm, give her food and water, that sort of thing. And then she just replies with a list of like cat names. So I'm like, we're going to get stuck with her. So
Yeah. That's so great to see. And it's also great to see all of you guys here with us today in the comment section. Eddie, Jason, Daniel, good to see you guys. Reminder, if you want to join in on the conversation today, talking about everything we learned from the first round of Titans OTAs today, including this new look team, whether it be the leadership, the style, the approach with players, whether it be from the coaching perspective or players individually, all of that stuff. I think it's hard not to say that this team just looks new and feels different to what it felt like last year with Brian Callahan in year one. If you guys want to join in on that conversation, you can do so on the 440 Sports YouTube channel, where we can see all of your guys' comments. Of course, we are presented by ML Rose Craft Beer and Burgers on this Hot Read Happy Hour Friday. That is also brought to you by Sinkers Beverages. Hope you can reward yourself tonight, Stoney, with a little toast. Easygoing Friday night. But
that's what I'm going for, man. I've got the wine open and just thinking, man, if we got to drive somewhere, my wife's going to have to take us.
I feel that. I feel that. Let's get into what the Titans did this week at OTAs. Obviously, me and Stoney, we're finishing up our vacations and getting back here to the Nashville area. So personally, I was not able to get out there to see practice on Wednesday, although I will get to be out there next Tuesday when I believe media availability is. It's the next round of OTAs, so we'll be out there for that. So I'll be there with my own two eyes, reacting and giving you guys the inside scoop of what's going on at Titans camp, getting to see some of these guys for the first time since Senior Bowl Combine, hands-on, get to see them running these drills. But yeah, I mean, Stoney, for like I was saying, it really does feel like this is a new look Titans team, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, when you say that, it's like, well, besides the quarterback and maybe a few pieces, are they really that changed? Like, obviously, it's not this overhaul of veteran talent and stars like we saw last year with Rand Carthen. But I do think when I say new look Titans, I think from the energy, from the process, from a coaching side, from an individual side, it is a new team. From the type of leadership and structure that they have in their competitive team versus team Harry Potter point system style scoring thing, all the way down to players, dropping weight, getting themselves better, their work ethics. It just feels like this is a new Titans team that doesn't necessarily have any of the weight of a Mike Vrabel era or a Rand Carthon era on it, right? And I think that, goes along with what we've been talking about all along in this. Mike Borgonzi and Chad Brinker wanted to have this being a tone-setting draft, right? It feels like that tone has been set, and we're looking at a totally different type of team from the neck up, right? In the way they work.
Yeah, for sure. And I was just about to say the same thing, JT. Would you talk about this supposed to be a draft class where they're going and getting guys that love football, that want to be there and that sort of thing. And now they're doing these things. They've talked about wanting to develop leadership. They've had these exercises where, they want to build team camaraderie, build team chemistry, that sort of thing. A byproduct of that, like if you do go get those guys that are leaders and they are growing into that, then the natural byproduct of that is that your team's going to feel a little bit different. It's going to have an influx in leadership. You think about like the energy that a guy like Femi Oladejo has infused into that defense. You think about how much Cam Ward is going to lift this offense. It's a natural byproduct for it to feel new. And I think that's the case when you look at the offensive line with the additions of Dan Moore Jr. and Kevin Zeitler, moving JC Latham to the right side. You look at him showing up like 40 pounds lighter or whatever than he was at the end of last season. Like, it does kind of feel like a transformative thing where now we're getting back to football. Okay, we've endured the 3-14 season. We've added players through the latest cycle, and now it's time to get back on the field and see, if we can yield some results from all of this change. And so I think it does kind of feel like there is some new juice into this franchise, and the vibes are high right now.
Yeah, I think you talk about bringing in more so than the stars, and we have some clips here from OTAs that we can play as we discuss some of these things. Cam Ward with, first of all, just that ball coming out. Like I know we talked about how fast the ball came out of Levis's hands. It comes out of Cam's hands faster in a different way. I feel like
I think it's easier.
It is. It feels a little bit more fluid, natural. Kind of those things. We also have some linebacker clips and some wide receiver stuff here to talk to you guys about. But yeah, just this whole new culture that I am, that we are getting with this team, I think is the vibe that I've picked up from watching these press conferences, from listening to these guys without even being there. I think it's easy to see that the entire vibe has changed on this, on this team. And I think that's for the better.
Yeah, and even in that clip right there, you see Cody Barton like run the drill and then turn and high five every guy after him that does it. Like already taking a step up in that position group, which is something we've talked about with this team before, is that, maybe last year they did have some leaders, but you want one guy in every position group to do that. And I'm not sure that the Titans were deep enough or loaded enough to have that a year ago. So I think that's a positive development.
Yeah, and Daniel here in the comments says Easton said the practices, Easton Freeze said the practices this year are much more intense than last year. I hope the 8-team competition is part of that. I would very much think so, considering when we talk to Brian Callahan and all these guys about that, it seemed like it was in the locker room, it was in the classroom, and on the practice field. So I think when you're watching these practices and we're reporting, when you see reports that Will Levis threw a pick, or this ball was broken up by Gabe Judy Lawley, or great catch by so-and-so or whatnot, or great work. Like, I think those things behind the curtains are being tallied by some of these guys and going into that point system, which, by the way, I sent out a tweet. We need to send one media guy on a Mission Impossible style mission to go find that board and see who currently is at the top with the most points and who's on the chopping block with the least. Because I do think, just to touch on that point scoring type of thing as well, not only does it breed this competition, and it, I think accelerates some of the leadership in some of these young guys and guys who were not necessarily leaders last year. I think it's also a great way for this coaching staff and the players alike to, when it comes down to time to cut guys and whatnot, there's a legit point total or a list of things like, this is why we're going to cut you. You did not do this, did not do this, did not do this. And like, you see where you rank. It's not like this guessing game anymore for a lot of these guys, which I think, for better or for worse, I think definitely can, from a psychological perspective, help some of these guys, not having that in the back of your mind being like, I don't really know how I maybe stand with these guys. Right.
Sure. And it's something that I learned very early on in the business world. I was told from a manager, probably 11 years ago at this point, that anytime you're going to go into a situation where you are going to have to argue a point of view, if you have a decision to make on something, go into the discussion with the data to back up your claim, because that erases a lot of the emotion out of the discussion. If you can point to a figure or a number or a point total and say, this is not up to the standard that we set before, it's cold, hard data, man. Like it erases a lot of the guesswork, where the person on the other end of the decision is thinking there's some sort of personal feeling towards them, or there's some sort of resentment. There's emotions run high in situations where people's jobs are on the line. And so anytime you can kind of build data to support a decision, that's the smart play to make. And so it's kind of interesting to hear that advice all those years ago in a corporate setting and think about it in terms of how it can be applied on the football field. It makes a lot of sense. And I do commend Brian Callahan for installing something like it.
Yeah, exactly. I'm with you there. And I do think, to kind of wrap up the conversation on that, with a clip from Denard Wilson here, which I thought this was interesting because, first of all, we just hadn't heard from him. A guy who came in last year, was high emotion, set the tempo type of guy. Was
Sure.
interested to hear what he had to say about this type of installation of leadership and type of thing with this team this year, and gave a pretty expressive answer. It seemed very more emotive in that answer than a lot of the other stuff. So I think that's an interesting one to share. But I do think that Daniel says interesting, trying to go from essentially a leadership vacuum to 16 potential leaders Callie is trying to develop, I think is, it's good to lay the groundwork like that. And I think, going back to that, like we said a little bit ago, it feels like this team doesn't have some of the weight of past Titans teams on it. Like Ed says here, since Vrabel's presence was so dominant, is it reasonable to think it takes a full year to transition from it, especially from the Rand Carthon era as well?
Yeah.
I think it was, last year was definitely a transition. Once again, we're transitioning through this team into what they need to be to get back to being competitive and playing competitive football. And I think that's exactly what it was. You have this kind of vacuum of non-leadership, or leadership that was loyal to somebody who's not here anymore. And it's hard to make that change and to keep that same style of leadership. And so I think it's the fresh start that they absolutely needed. And I think so far, once again, we talked about this. Does it necessarily translate to wins? I don't know. I think that's hard to say, but I think it's a step in the right direction, to say the least.
There's also a part of me that wonders, I would be curious to ask Brian Callahan, Nick Holtz, Denard Wilson, any of them. You hear this cliche in the NFL that the best locker rooms are the ones that police themselves, that sort of deal. So there is a part of me that wonders if this coaching staff a year ago felt as though they needed to be hands off to let the locker room come together, and it just didn't really manifest that way. And so they're correcting course this summer by saying, all right, if it's not going to happen on its own, we have to step in and install some rules, some competition, find leaders to develop, so that we have a more hands-on approach in developing the camaraderie on the team. I would be curious, from the coaching standpoint, from season 1 to season 2, how this staff kind of views that aspect, the leadership in the locker room, if it's something that they felt like they had to step in and kind of take more of an active approach with.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there as well. And here's what Denard Wilson had to say about the new leadership style, and then we'll get to this Jeffrey Simmons conversation, which I don't think is really a conversation, to be frank, to be honest. But we'll get to that here in a second. But here's what Denard Wilson had to say about the leadership of this team and the new look of it in 2025.
And out of that, how much are you enjoying these opportunities that are created out of this new offseason?
Well, I think last year the leadership can always be better. I think that as they look back and we looked back at ourselves, some guys had self-reflections on how could they help other players. We talk about leading by example is not what you want to do. It's your job to show up and play hard. That's your job. But if you're not bringing people to the well with you, if you're not taking them to the water and they're not walking with you hand to hand, you're not a leader. So right now the guys understand that leadership isn't just about showing up and do your job. This is your profession. Leading is bringing other people with you and teaching the young guys and teaching even the guys that's been here to be the best versions of themselves. And I think that everybody on this team right now has gravitated to that message, and it's been sprinkled down from the top down from our head coach. He's done an excellent job this offseason. Just like we all say, it's self-evaluations. He's self-evaluated some things that he could have did well, and he's implementing it with us, and we're feeding it and we're running into it, and the players love it. The energy, the effort, the attention to detail, understanding, it's not about the plays that you should make. It's the plays that get you beaten in this game. And the guys thoroughly understand that we lost games because we beat ourselves. And we're trying to get that off of the radar so we give ourselves a chance to line up and be competitive every game that we in this year.
What are your expectations for?
And I think that kind of goes hand in hand with the Jeffrey Simmons thing, right? Like, how could this team get better? Well, I think it's in an attempt to, if you remember last year, as this team continued to just lose games, there was a sense that by the end of the year, it really felt like this team was playing for themselves rather than the team, right?
Sure.
Especially with Jeffrey Simmons. I can remember going into the locker room for the last 3 home games of the season, talking to Jeffrey Simmons, and he said the same thing. Like, I got to play for myself right now. Like, at that point,
Ain't good.
Which to people's point here in the comments brings into question, like, is it still Jeffrey Simmons' leadership? Is he the top dog in terms of leadership? Which I think we can get into here, and how that translates to whether or not it's important for him to be here at OTAs. But you hear what Denard Wilson said, this self-scouting, this self-evaluation. It feels like on top of this new leadership style, it's that this team will now win and lose together, where last year you had some of those pieces that had tastes of winning and knew what this team could have been, and was still maybe holding on to pieces of that versus living in the now. And I think that's where you hear a little bit of that emotion and that motivation from Denard Wilson in that excerpt right there. Like, I think this is a team that realizes from a coaching perspective that they need to unify this team more than it was last year.
Yeah, I would agree wholeheartedly. And it kind of goes back to what I was saying about last year. Like, I don't know if they just trusted the players to do it on their own, if there wasn't a nudge to get closer by the end of the season, but it didn't happen. It didn't materialize. This team, I felt like they played hard late into the season, but there's a difference between playing hard and I think playing inspired is how I would say. And it just didn't, like, by the end of the season, it did just kind of feel like but really a collection of individuals more so than a team. And I think it was part of the reason, like, there was a big discussion at the end of last year about whether or not Brian Callahan's the guy. And part of it was because of the team's performance. Part of it was because of their demeanor, their body language, like who are the leaders on this team, that sort of thing. So, I mean, I get the emphasis that's placed on it. And in a sense, like, I can't blame this coaching staff for overcorrecting in this manner either.
Yeah. And Team Marymount says he didn't say you've got to play for yourself. He said you've got to play for the name on the back of your jersey, which I hope it's your name. I hope it's yourself. And he meant for your own pride, which I think is fair. However, yeah, I'm with you. It was more of pieces of a team rather than a team itself. This one here, let's see where this question is. Ray Skull says, I asked Easton this question in the morning. He never answered. Is it a fair comparison that Simmons is the defensive tackle version of Lawan and he could lose his captain badge in the same way as Lawan? I don't think so. Like, I think, listen, for all I'm concerned, like, unless there was more smoke and mirrors this time around, like at this point versus during the draft cycle, that like this is contract related, this is not happy related, then I would buy into that. Like, I don't think that this Jeffrey Simmons thing is really anything. And by training camp or whenever, mandatory minicamp, like if he's not there at mandatory minicamp, then you have a problem, right? But it is voluntary for a reason. And you think differently?
Yeah, I think I'm on the other side of this one, just because of the context. I mean, usually I am like, I defend people that skip the voluntary OTAs, but I just feel like this one's bad optics, man. And in an off season where they're talking about wanting to grow the locker room closer and cultivate the character of leadership and all that sort of stuff, and being there for one another, and that's what they're working on at this time of the year. And and all that, like he's a guy that I think should be there because he is probably the best player on this team. And he's the guy on your defense that you look to set the example, to kind of be that guy that does show the younger players along the way. And if it wasn't the fact that he's the only one that's not there in some form or capacity, I'd probably give him a pass. And to be fair, like, we don't know why he's not there. It is voluntary. It's not like he has to hold a press conference and let everybody know he's dealing with a personal issue, or no, he just doesn't want to travel to Nashville or whatever. Doesn't owe us that. And it's completely fair to him. But I do think that him being the only one not there, and the fact that it seems like with this player, we're having a conversation, something like this once every few months, whether it's, saying something like nobody runs on the Tennessee Titans, or if it's, his behavior against Buck that day at training camp, or, there's something going on that we're kind of questioning, like what's the real mental makeup here? Does he really have the mental makeup that you look for in a leader? If those things weren't present in this case, I think I would give him a pass. But I just think it's bad optics in a year where you're trying to foster this new team environment to not have this guy that is your best player out there with him right now.
Yeah, and listen, I mean, if Brian Callahan would have said something more so than just all thumbs up, green light of saying like he's not worried about him, right? Like then maybe I would be okay with that. But the fact that, it's like, I'm not worried about that, type of thing, and that like we're just going to keep moving along with it. I do think that there is an essence of that, right? Like what you're saying. And I think Ray Skull says like he isn't a good player, just not that great of a leader. Like I think it's also fair to say like Jeffrey Simmons has been one of the only guys who even last year had to step up, to begin with. And this was a guy who already was trying to be a leader. This new system is more about cultivating new leaders than needing the guys who were already there through the terrible times of last year, like Jeffrey was, right? And so I think that is another way to look at it. I'm not saying I disagree at all, right? I do think that there is, the optics do not look great. I agree with you there. But I think he is a guy that has put in his time as a leader on this team, right? And when you're looking at a new kind of style of trying to develop new leaders, it may just not be what, how much can Jeffrey Simmons really get out of that, right? I think that's where I stand on that one.
What do you think of, let's put our tinfoil hats on. This is my conspiracy theory. We're all thinking about this trade rumor from the wrong perspective. Everybody's thinking about it like, oh, well, the Titans can move on from him and get extra picks right now. But what if it's the other side of the party? I mean, what if Jeffrey Simmons is the one that like, hey, I'm going into my 7th year. I don't want to be here for a rebuild. Ship me off to a contender while I can still play. I mean, I think logically you could make a reasonable argument for that.
Yeah, I to not get too far in the weeds, like wouldn't they have done that at the trade deadline then last year? Like
yeah, we better not get too far into the weeds.
Just something to think about there. But yeah, I'm not too worried about. Listen, if we get into next week and we get into closer to mandatory minicamp, it's not nothing, right? You keep your eyes on it.
It's not nothing. That's the way I would phrase it. Yeah.
But something to keep an eye on there. Some other new ways that this Titans team looks different. It looks, is a new look team with the quarterbacks. I think the approach to the quarterback position obviously is different with a new presumed starting quarterback, but the way we've talked about this a little bit already, but seeing that more play out right now for the Titans with Cam Ward, I think is a new way for this team to start over, right? We've talked about how it was slow, and it was really kind of a marathon for this team to get Will Levis up to speed to be the starting quarterback. Whereas it doesn't feel like that with Cam Ward. And that's something we talked about early on at rookie minicamp, right? The difference in how they talk about Cam versus how they talked about Levis. Obviously, the Will Levis press conference, I know people have talked about this. The vibes are very not great. Like we're sobbing in the club right now is how I would describe it. But I think you see the different approach for some of these guys. I know friend of the show, Easton Freeze, noted that Will Levis looks to be a little leaner, especially working with Jordan Palmer, which Brian Callahan and Nick Holtz have both praised this offseason. So I think, is that a testament to actually Will Levis putting in the work, or once again just trying to drive up the hype machine and drive up the potential price of a Will Levis trade and say, this guy's working hard, this guy, he's doing everything right, oh, we'll take a third for him now instead of a fourth or something like that? Like, I don't know, but still putting in the work. With Cam though, I do think that, like we alluded to on that show probably about 2-3 weeks ago, whenever rookie minicamp was, it feels like everything's happening a lot faster. And with things happening a lot faster, it feels like more things are happening around the quarterback position as well. Easton, we just keep talking about Easton today for some reason, just getting mentioned a lot, but, did a great article on the Titans using this new VR technology to train, more of the mental side of being a quarterback, the decision-making side of the quarterback, which, by the way, if that's what we're doing, or that's the point of this VR simulator, is to, which, by the way, if anybody doesn't know, the Titans are basically saw what Jaden Daniels did with VR training last year, and basically training, against different coverages, setting the speed of the game to make, set the speed super high in this VR virtual environment to then make the game feel slow on Sundays type of thing, is the hope with a lot of these mental reps. Making good decisions when you're looking at coverages or the lack thereof, which can be disguised and can be super changed out and whatnot. That type of thing. If that's what it is, and that's the mental, we should just lock Will Levis in there like it's the Matrix, and just he doesn't get out until he figures it out and he opens his third eye, right? But I think it's really interesting to see them already looking at a lot of these different things and using a lot of this different technology, which we would not have even thought of to be really discussing about Will Levis, right? Last year, we were at this point, we're still talking about how Will Levis is tweaking with his mechanics, and that we're hoping that the tweaks are done by training camp to be ready to go and then start clicking with this team. With Cam, the mechanics are done. Like they're not
going to change them.
They're not going to change them. Which I think is a very, is vastly different to what they had to do with Will Levis. And you can start to see this connection with Calvin Ridley and things like that, kind of flourish, even though it is against air. You can see these things of like, we're moving past the mechanics to now recognizing and training that brain that we invested so much draft capital in to be our starting quarterback, and those types of things. I do also want to bring up that, there were some contraband memes of Easton in the VR headset that were not allowed to be posted, but I don't think anybody's going to come after me if I put them in here at the 33-minute mark of a podcast. So I just wanted to show some of them because I think they're hilarious. Here's Easton in Ready Player One with the mask on, which I think is funny. And then I couldn't help myself, and I'm sorry, Titans fans, I just couldn't help myself. But Easton actually was there. He was simulating himself being in the room when AJ Brown was traded.
Oh man,
is great. I think,
and it's even got the reminder up there: lost to Bengals, one AFC divisional.
It's the only picture of the room I could find on Google.
Brutal.
I just had to do that. I had to.
Brutal.
But yeah, no, I think exactly what you said, right? They don't want to change the mechanics, and I think Nick Holtz had a really, really interesting comment on that with how they're starting to work with Cam, because I think Nick Suss on a football show the other day, or I guess yesterday, brought up an interesting point that also, unlike Will Levis last year, who was taking a lot of the safety valve routes, was dumping off, was doing a lot of those things, along with, taking the risks into mixed coverage and whatnot. Like, Cam is taking a lot of those risks into mixed coverage, but executing on a lot of them, not taking the easy dump route, doing a lot of things at a faster pace and a faster speed than Will Levis did last year, which I think is really interesting. So Nick Holtz was asked about the approach with Cam Ward this offseason, and here's what he had to say.
It's always a balance. There's kind of you should be learned by doing. You know what I mean? The experience is the greatest teaching tool we have. So you want him to test it and kind of see what it is. I think he had one yesterday. He tried to fit in a ball into a real tight window, and I'm sure in college that ball was open and got completed. And yesterday, different results. And he's kind of like, well, I used to do this, that, and kind of sits in the meetings, sees the speed of the game, how quick those windows are, and there's differences. And then there's other ones he still does fit in. So we want him to be aggressive. I think you draft a player like him that has his tape, and you don't want to coach all those really positive aspects out of him and make him a robot. But at the same time, he's got to learn the value of the football too.
Yeah, like I think once again, the hunch we had back in rookie minicamp is like the language around this guy is that we're ready to start, being trial by fire here now, so that you can be way ahead of the game when you get into that live action, versus Will just not really being ready until the last game of the preseason for us to feel comfortable. And even then we kind of were just still kind of questioning, like, is he ready?
Yeah.
Like, I think it's so much faster now.
It is. And it's a testament to one of the key things I talked about in the evaluation of Cam Ward is, like, can they get him in the meeting room and figure out whether or not he's got the mental makeup to do this job? And it sounds like he's got the mental makeup to do this job. So there's no training wheels. We're just going to go full bore into this thing. And that wasn't the case last summer, where they had to slow down and say, like, well, we're tweaking this with his throwing mechanics. We're working on this, we're working on that. And like you said, we got to the end of the summer and we're still seeing some of this stuff that's like, man, I don't know if this guy's got it or not. Like, something just seems a little wonky here. The chemistry is not right. The timing is not right. And I think it speaks to what Brian Callahan, Nick Holtz and company want in a quarterback, that timing, that quick processing, how important that is for what they want to do. It sounds to me like they've already checked that box and they're working on more advanced things.
Yeah, and Eddie here says the Wyatt quote, "You hold your breath," and then their completions is basically perfect. Yes. It's how I watched all the Miami tape. You look at Busting Diamonds here saying, sounds like they're much higher on Ward than they were on Levis at any point last year, which I think brings me to the point here, which I wanted to make. It's that why it feels different this year and why it's a new look for the Titans, because last year Brian Callahan, Nick Holtz, and this entire offensive staff had to go in with the mindset of, let me try to fix this guy. I can fix him. I can, the old coaches, the old coaches Pandora box, right? Like always trying to, open that box and see if we can get, what we're dreaming of. I'm trying to fix this guy. I'm trying to do that. And then it failed, as it always does. Whereas this year, the framing of the question is, we don't need to fix it. We can work with it. So let's just immediately start getting him in there to know what we want him to do. We can mold him. Maybe that's the difference. Instead of we can fix him, it's we can mold him, which I think is the difference there.
Yeah, I would agree wholeheartedly. I mean, that to me, that's the difference between the two. So it's the approach. It's coming across in the press conferences. It's coming across in how they're glowingly talking about Cam Ward. I mean, what more is there to say? I think it's pretty clear at this point, JT.
Yeah, I agree with you there. We can move on here, talking some wide receivers. I talked to a few people who were there present, give you some winners and losers. We got to start making a ranking board of, like, our own point scoring system of like who's in the lead for wide receiver 3 versus wide receiver 9 or something like that. We got to start with that. We'll get to that. JC Latham's transformation and some things on the defense here, but not before we thank our presenting sponsor, ML Rose Craft Beer and Burgers. Locations all across the greater Nashville area: Capitol View, Franklin, Gallatin, Melrose 8th Avenue, Mount Juliet, Sylvan Park, and another location coming soon to Inglewood near East Nashville. Simply the best selection of craft beer and burgers in the city. Over 25 beers on tap and a menu that is sure to have what you're looking for every single time, whether it's the burgers, whether it's the appetizers, whether it's the other sandwiches and handhelds that they have, all the way down to their salads, which I know are a huge hit in your household, Mr. Keeley.
Yes.
You cannot go wrong at ML Rose. I don't think they did a burger of the month for May. I'm sorry, guys. We failed you this month. I never saw anything, even though I've been there like 2 or 3 times.
Yeah, we're still waiting on that Borgonzi burger.
So we're still waiting on the Borgonzi burger. Maybe they've been in the lab for like 2 months now, saying like, we got to get this right. We got to figure it out. But yes, it's simple. You got to get out there, whether it's for trivia night, whether it's before a Nashville soccer game, whether it's, just going out for date night or hanging out with some buddies watching any of the championship playoff sports that are going on right now. ML Rose is the place to be. We thank them for being our presenting sponsor. And then Sinkers Beverages also sponsors the show, another proud sponsor of the Hot Read Podcast and the Hot Read Podcast Happy Hour that we are having right now on this Friday afternoon. 4-time Best of Nashville Liquor Store of the Year, for good reason, because they simply have the best selection of beer, wine, and spirits in town. Gotta go check them out. And when you do, sign up for their In Crowd, where you can get special allocations, benefits, and tastings that you only get to be a part of if you join the In Crowd. Shop Sinkers at sinkersbeverages.com, and we thank them for sponsoring the show. Okay, we can we can get into the wide receivers, which what I wrote about the wide receivers here, the winners. This is it's a tough conversation to have, because our loser on this list is a tough one for us planting our flags like we did last week on the Q&A one. But the winner is also a dub, right? What I wrote down for the wide receivers before we get to these, I said, I told you all about Jefferson. Van Jefferson was the talk of the town so far. He looks good. They're talking glowingly about him. Reinforces my point to everybody who was telling me that Van Jefferson won't be on this roster or he's a cut candidate. Like, I mean, as Richard says, Jefferson is competing against rookies. He's competing against everybody. Calvin Ridley's out there. Tyler Lockett wasn't out there or was working on the side, but Calvin Ridley's out there. Like, he's competing against everybody. Van Jefferson is doing everything he needs to because he is the veteran presence, the third veteran presence that they needed on this team, which is very clear. And I think you're starting to see some of that in the way they talk about him. Not to mention, he also just looked good. Now, the opposite side of the coin, which Team Ramrod says here, he says the way people are talking so glowingly about Van Jefferson make me think we're screwed. Age 28 breakout season. It goes back to the idea that maybe the situation in Pittsburgh wasn't the greatest for him.
Maybe.
I mean, going from that McVay offense to was his not his second season, but it was his third and fourth season, the Matt Canada, Arthur Smith regime of the Steelers, which
I think so.
Would make a lot of sense for why the production isn't there. I mean, that speaks for itself. However, Daniel says Van has a Super Bowl ring. Like, even though he did it in his rookie year, right? Like, he's been around the block. He understands what it takes to be in the league. And so I think it's more so a win for Van Jefferson, because people are talking about him and he looks like he if that doesn't work out there, like John is saying, I get it, but it's a win for him because he's doing everything that he needs to. And it's also a win for me because I think it just makes so much sense that he is on this team.
And it's a good thing for the Titans. I mean, we shouldn't, I know we get caught up in our takes sometimes, and it's a win or lose situation, right versus wrong, that sort of thing. But ultimately, it's good for the Titans that Van Jefferson is looking good so far, because guess what? they need freaking wide receivers. They need bodies. They need dudes. And he's another one that they can count on that has the real NFL experience. So, I mean, I get the apprehension, like, oh man, it's May 30th and we're hyping up Van Jefferson here. Let's be careful here, boys. I get it, but I think in the right role, Van Jefferson playing well is still a plus, a net positive for the Tennessee Titans.
Yeah. 2 other winners from people that I've talked to that said these are the guys that really stood out to me. Elick Ayumanor is looking like the best rookie wide receiver right now. He looks like the real deal. I mean, you can see it in some of the reps that he's taking just from online. I cannot wait to go and see these guys in person. And also the speed that Chimere Dike apparently is playing with from a lot of the people who have been there is just
love to hear that.
He's looking fast, even though it is a little awkward fast, right? Like with him, but like he's looking good. Good to see. The one loser, though, I will say, Bryce Oliver apparently did not have the best showing, which Bryce Oliver stands. We made once again. It's only one day, right? But it's good to see the competition, and it's good to see all these guys because, like you said, they need bodies. Eddie's saying what I'm hearing is Rip Jaquan. Well, I think that's been over for a while. If you had to ask me,
I heard that a few months ago, Eddie.
But here's what Nick Holtz had to say about a lot of these wide receivers: Van Jefferson, the rookies, all across the board, how they've been performing so far here at Titans camp. Here's what Nick Holtz had to say.
Van. He is kind of this quiet, steady, kind of everything we had hoped from just a really dependability standpoint. He knows what to do, knows how to do it. I think a guy like him becomes a quarterback's friend and, the offense's friend really quickly because he's played in a system. The Rams stuff was similar. Some of the stuff they did in Atlanta was similar. And then with Arthur last year in Pittsburgh, some of the same passing concepts. So he's got banked reps on those, so that's been really good. Tyler is a kind of a football junkie. He's I've kind of had to tell him to stop texting me all the time, and he's watching all these tapes and sending me these videos and everything else. And it's like, man, we are going on air against we got a bunch of trash cans out there. That's a great play, but sometimes we got to hone it back. And then the 3 young guys,
Right.
Those guys, it's been really impressive how serious they are about football and how well they take in information. When we were in the pre-draft process, those 3 guys, there were a lot of guys, but those 3 in particular really stood out as guys that were smart and could really come in and kind of like handle it a lot. You didn't have to slow it down, really they could catch up to the veterans pretty quickly, and that's been the case. And so there's a maturity of those 3, which is pretty fun. And, we have extra meetings with the rookies in the afternoon, and they're on it, and they got great questions, and that's they're football guys, so it's been awesome.
Hear from Nick Holtz about a lot of these guys. Van Jefferson calls a quarterback's friend. Tyler Lockett bought in. Rookies, I know Restrepo also had this to say that like him, DK, Ayumanor, Helm, like all the guys, Cam are all in the building at 5 a.m. every day, working their butts off. Where did we hear that last year? Will Levis. So how much does that really matter? But good to see that like they're building a strong young core there in together, which I think is nice to see from the wide receivers. And so it's going to be interesting because as we get through some of these other ones, we'll talk about JC Latham here, and then some of the edge rushers, some of the inside linebackers, those types of things. We won't really know anything until the pads come on, right? Like I think at this point, like we can talk about the guys who look good with no pads on against air, but ultimately, like, I do think this is funny. Like, Bustin' Diamond says, all I know is I saw Brandon Allen to Gunnar Helm TD today from the Titans IG story. What are we doing here? Like, that's what you're going to get until we get some pads on, because, like, every play is going to look good. So it's going to be fun. Another guy who has a new look entirely, JC Latham.
Yeah.
Who, we got to talk to, or they got to talk to yesterday, where he said that he weighed in at close to 370 last year at his heaviest, where on the Busing with the Boys. And I think in this media scrum as well said that like he started to notice that and got up close to 370 around the Chargers game. Now weighs in at 336 at the time of that scrum. So a massive transformation for him, and to still look the way he does at 336, I think it is going to be crazy for him. Cannot wait to see him back at his, the more familiar position for him at this new weight. And I do also think that, it makes a lot of sense considering that Chargers game was right around the time we were starting to talk about Latham hitting his rookie wall. And if the rookie wall for him was that he just was not playing at a weight that was conducive to success for him, like it wasn't more so the technique or anything. It simply was just like, we need to get you at a better weight. Like
it's the conditioning.
I think it may just be wheels up for him going forward. And like, I may have no questions about him if he's getting back to that type of if he's getting to that type of weight and is going to be able to play some of that good ball that we saw him play early on last season. If that can translate again, like I have no questions about him and how he's going to look this year, especially next to Zeitler.
That's what we want, man. We want that good ball. I tell you what, I thought late last year, I even wondered if he may have been hurt for a part down the stretch because he just wasn't like moving the same. And hearing him talk about how the weight kind of impacted his like ability to climb to the second level and his conditioning and how he was winded and maybe, things slip when that happens. It didn't look like he moved as well. And that is the explanation for it. And it sounds like he's taken it upon himself to improve that, to drop the weight, to improve the conditioning so that maybe he doesn't run into a wall similar to that this season.
Yeah. And so good to see him. Cannot wait to see those guys go up against, some other players and not just, I wish that they would, Bustin' Diamond says he put on a freshman 50, which is funny. I saw someone say like, we need to start seeing Bertha out there and seeing them go up against that. I don't know if they are yet, but trust me, it is coming. That the content you guys seek will be coming soon. Don't you worry. Let's talk about the defensive side of the ball to wrap things up here and the newness of that. First of all, Femi Oladejo with a new number already, 7. Does that add more aura to him? Does that take away? You're a fan, big fan of 7 off the edge?
Yeah, why not? It's different. It's unique.
Yeah. I do think that it does also tie into the newness of this edge group. Certainly a little bigger, a little stronger than I would say last year's group was. Just not stronger as in like on paper it looks stronger. No, like physically, like the players are stronger this year. And that's what Brian Callahan had to say in his early assessment of that group. Here's what he had to say along those lines of them looking stronger, but also, what's changed about this group this year. Here's Brian Callahan.
I feel good about the players we added. I think the dimensions of the outside linebacker position, I think we're bigger and stouter and stronger at the spot, just body type wise. I think that's by design as well. We'll see if we're better than we were a year ago. But I do like the players we've added. I'm excited about what they could bring for us. We're definitely at the edges a more physical looking group from top to bottom. I think is really what the key part of that is depth wise too. They all fit the profile we're looking for. So as of right now, feel good about those guys, and we'll see if we're better or not. But I like what they brought.
Yeah, we'll have to see, right? Because the physicality is what they desperately needed last year.
Yeah.
You talk about how teams were pretty much able to shut down that 1-2 punch of Sweat and Latham, or not Latham, Sweat and Simmons in the middle, because you really only needed to have one guy on the edge, right? You did not have to double team your edge rushers because you could almost stop them with one arm, like the way Harold Landry and Arden Key were kind of playing. Although it does seem like Arden Key has made some progression. Denard Wilson also spoke glowingly of him in his availability. And, I think when you have Draymond Jones, Arden Key, Femi Oladejo and get some of these other guys into the rotation here, which I do still think, like, I feel like we're going to see Oladejo not necessarily be that 3-down starter early, but be in a rotation with these guys, these other two, maybe add in a Harrell, maybe add in whoever the guy they got from the Falcons who had like -4 sacks. I forget. Like get them all, Lorenzo Carter, get them all mixed in. Like I do think you can find some early physical success there. So definitely new look, definitely new direction, which I think is exciting to see. And then you have the last one I want to talk about, which is the interior linebacking group, which it's going to be interesting to see this competition unfold. I think like if there's one competition that you can look to, like wide receivers, obviously, like everything past, technically, I feel like people want to say even wide receiver 3 is up for grabs. Like anything past Tyler Lockett seems like that's up for grabs. The cornerback room, who is looking, I wrote a piece this week on Stacking the Inbox, who's looking to be that cornerback 4, maybe the second nickel behind Roger McCreary, and potentially usurp him next year if they looked for life after Roger McCreary. Those types of things there in the secondary I think are interesting. But really, the interior linebacking position is so interesting to me because Daniel says they still really need another edge in interior linebacker. I'm here to tell you, at least for interior linebacker, like I think this team is so set like in what they want to do on the defensive front and in the secondary that they're really okay just saying Cody Barton and the best man up, like the best man, whoever wins this competition. Like it's clear they have not put a lot of thought into or really a lot of care into who plays opposite Cody Barton, but still it's going to be a very, very interesting battle. And here's what Brian Callahan and Denard Wilson had to say about the battle, which a couple guys that you can hear early on here that they give a glowing review, but they both have a similar message to say about the competition currently. Here are their thoughts.
That's a position very similar to the fronts, that the pads are important. You don't necessarily really know until you can start actually making contact and fitting runs and putting your pads on people. There's some guys that we're excited about that I think have a chance to be good players, but there's a lot of time in between now and when we play that's got to get sorted out. So far, so good as far as guys knowing what to do and how to do it, but the pads is the separator. That's you can't get it quite the evaluation you necessarily need to from top to bottom, but I think James Williams has done a good job. Cedric's filled in nicely. We've signed 2 other linebackers in recent weeks that have filled in and built the depth in the room. And so it's an ongoing process.
It's extremely wide open. First of all, great addition getting Cody. He's a leader. He's a guy that can orchestrate the defense. He's ahead of it. He studies. He's smart. Love that we have him. But in terms of the other position, it's kind of everybody's getting an opportunity. We're rotating them. Cedric has played some Mike, have put Cody at the wheel a little bit when Ced's in there. James has been in there. Anthony, all the guys that we have played. And, right now they're getting a feel for the defense, understanding what they're supposed to be doing. But when the pads come on, they'll separate themselves, and the best man is going to play. And then also we talked about position flexibility. Some guys can do things better than others. So there's always a chance of first and second down having players out there. You can have third down, dime linebacker, whatever it may be. But the competition is wide open, just like the DB, the young guys we talked about in the DB room. And what it's going to do is going to make us better from the bottom up. Organizations, they strive when it's built from the bottom up, not top down. And, going through last year, at the end of the year when we kind of fell off a little bit, the depth wasn't there. Right now we got young guys that we're creating depth. Some guys have played. So I'm excited about the nucleus and how we're going to build it from the bottom up. And these guys are giving everything they have, and love the work and the effort that they're putting in right now.
So certainly wide open. Can't really tell much until the pads come on, but a few things. One, James Williams, Cedric Gray certainly seem to be getting, name points if you really are into that and take a lot of stock into that. Daniel saying neither coach mentioning Otis Reese, it's telling. With Otis Reese, right? For me, I feel like he never really gets talked about and still always ends up being that third guy in the rotation just because when the pads come on, he accelerates. He is above the guys. And so
Yeah.
how I put it right now is that in terms of the pecking order, to me, it feels like Otis Reese, he just won't die right now. And when the pads come on, he separates himself. Although I think he is better suited to be more of a special teams type of player, because I think that's where he truly excels. I think he's the front runner for me. Cedric Gray, I think, is still the wild card here. We not sure exactly what you're going to get with him having pads on, because he just certainly did not get nearly enough, if any, reps at all last season with pads on at that position in games. James Williams is lurking. He played a lot of snaps. I know friend of the show, Iron City Film, put out a great breakdown of some of what made James Williams work last year in that 3-4 game span that he got to play. Lurking, can he make a year 2 jump? If so, would be a great success story to see the 7th round pick become that starting guy. Like you've alluded to, Stoney, the Titans continue to churn the waiver wire as that top order guy, right? Bring in Amari Burney, Curtis Jacobs, Orji Anferny, like they're bringing in a lot of guys, just continuing to churn that position. And then of course you have the UDFA, David Gabenda. Like, what is he? I just put question marks next to him, right?
Yeah.
Like case in point, a lot of guys like that will be fighting for 3 or 4 spots here. And I think it's going to be really interesting.
It's going to be a fun battle to watch. I really liked what Denard said about having like the multiple packages or players that can do multiple things. Like it's kind of warming me up to this idea that there might not be just a set second linebacker next to Cody Barton. Like there might not be a second linebacker on the field in some situations. They might add defensive backs to cover for it, and Cody Barton's the only linebacker on the field. There might be certain looks on first and second down where they have Cedric Gray in because he's better at, fitting the gaps and defending the run. He's a better tackler, that sort of thing. But then on third down, maybe they put James Williams in because he's better at rushing the passer. So it kind of made me think like they're really deep at this group, and it's not deep it's deep in a literal sense. They have a lot of bodies there. It's not to say that they have many, if any, you would call established guys there, but they have a lot, and they have a lot of different skill sets. It's going to be interesting to see who the best man really is by summer's end, but it's also going to be interesting to see what skill sets develop from these guys and where some of these linebackers can show that they provide value to the team. Maybe it's not a complete overall game, but like in James Williams' sense, he's really quick. He's a downhill guy. Maybe he can rush the pass or something. So stuff like that is going to be really interesting to watch this summer, along with just the true spirit of the competition, who the best linebacker is from this bunch.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with you there. And that's going to do it for our roundup of OTAs 1, and that's going to do it for our show today. Appreciate you guys all being here with us today. Cannot wait to be out there, seeing those guys with our own eyes, giving you those takeaways from our eyes only next week. And super excited to do that when they hit the fields once again for the media availability on Tuesday. So Tuesday we'll be out there at practice, and then instant reactions here on the podcast for you guys next week. Thank you to ML Rose and Sinkers Beverages for sponsoring the show as always. Eddie does bring up, I did just get an email here where Eddie said, can't believe we just hired the Texans PR manager. The Titans have hired a new PR person, which
How about that?
Who is that? He is Everett Greelings from the Texans. So
that can't be a real name.
Apparently it is. So Everett, if you're
good
watching,
for him.
Good, nice to meet you. We'll see you out there, and we'll talk to you guys next week when we're out there, or at least I am. Seeing these guys doing all that. But until then, this has been the Hot Read Podcast. We will talk to you on Tuesday, and have a great weekend, everybody.